My name is Michèle Sigg. I am the Executive Director of the Dictionary of African Christian Biography, which is an online electronic project that has existed for over 25 years. And it is open access, meaning no subscription is required to access any of our materials, including our Journal of African Christian Biography, which has been in existence since 2016. It is a project that covers the stories of African Christian forebears, both men and women, since the beginning of the Christian era all the way to the present time. And all of Africa, covering all denominations and traditions. Anyone who Africans consider important to telling the story of African Christianity. It was designed and created by a missionary child, a child of missionaries. The founding director's name is Dr. Jonathan Bonk, who grew up in Ethiopia. And then as he went back to his home country of Canada for studies, realized that the stories of the African missionaries and evangelists and catechists that were doing incredible work in the country were nowhere to be found. And they were going to be lost to human memory, and that they were an important part of the African story. And so he came together with some African scholars and Africanists to devise a way to preserve this memory, to recover and preserve it. And in 1995 had a consultation out of which was born the idea of the DACB to be an online project that would then be accessible universally. And that was important, not just recovering the stories, but also making the stories widely accessible to anyone who could get to a computer that would have access to the internet. And so it has been, the DACB went online in 1998, the first website, and I came on board in 2000, and just grew out of learning about the project and working with the stories. Little by little, the stories have been coming to us since that time. Yes. So I would say the first period under Director Jonathan Bonk, we spent time both adding to the project in different ways, promoting it. So Dr. Bonk would travel and promote the DACB. It was his brainchild. He would promote the DACB wherever he would go, in Africa and all kinds of international meetings where he could spread the news about it. And at the same time, I was busy working away with the center where the DACB was first located was at the Overseas Ministry Study Center in New Haven, Connecticut, where Jonathan Bonk was the executive director. And so for about 10 years, we had scholarships that were offered to Africans to come to the Overseas Ministry Study Center and stay in residence as Project Luke scholars or Project Luke fellows. And they received a stipend and a place to stay in exchange for writing 10 biographies that year, which would then, little by little, add to the collection of biographies that we had. So that is one, and at the same time, I would traveled to several countries with an oral historian who with whom I learned to teach oral history methodology, which is a way of documenting biographies using interviews with people. And so I traveled with him to several countries, Nigeria, Uganda, Madagascar. And so the idea was to equip the people on the ground to then write these biographies. So for that period, that was one way we attempted to both grow the collection and to spread the news about the DACB. And so it grew very slowly. And then in 2011, 2012, I had the opportunity of coming to Africa to actually study at Africa International University and get a Master's of Theology there in World Christianity, and also to do my own research, my own field research on the ground. And I studied a revival movement in Madagascar. And so I learned a lot. And I also did some promoting of the DACB in Nairobi, in and around Nairobi while I was there. And at that time, then the DACB was set to move from the Overseas Ministry Study Center to Boston University, to the Center of Global Christianity and Mission, where it moved officially in 2012 because Jonathan Bonk was retiring from the Overseas Ministry Studies Center. And so at that time, Professor Dana Robert, who was a faculty member at Boston University and director of the Center for Global Christianity and Mission, invited the DACB to come and be one of the digital projects at the CGCM. And then she invited me to apply to be in the doctoral program so that I could continue my work if I felt called to do so, which I did. And so that is how I joined the PhD program at Boston University. And the DACB became a part of the center's digital projects in Boston. So that was kind of a transition to a new phase. And this phase in Boston University offered us different possibilities. As head of the Center for Global Christianity and Mission at Boston University, Professor Robert then decided that we would organize, together we organized a conference, first ever to be organized, the conference in African Christian biography in 2015 at Boston University. And there scholars came from, we invited scholars from across the United States and even from Africa, invited several to come to be part of that conference. And it was an there were scholars from many fields: history, religious studies, African studies, even other humanities. And so but it was all biography. So and out of that we published a book called African Christian Biographies, I think Story, Lives, and Stories and Lives, something like that. And it was published in South Africa. So and it is a book that basically is the first that really holds together stories of African Christian biographies, both stories of Africans, but also some reflection on the process of and the use of biography as a way to talk about history and to tell the African Christian story. Biography, the use of biography is very important in telling the story of, as Lamin Sanneh would say, the little agents, the people who are not the powerful, the grassroots folks, the people who are the unofficial agents, as he would call them. And so the catechists and the evangelists and the people who worked, the women in the background who help with the Bible studies, and the children's and the educators and the teachers. And it's a way, biography is a key feature for telling the story in Africa, where there are often few written documents to tell the story. Biography can go beyond that because it uses oral history, the memories of people, and interviews with people, and also delves into oral tradition, things that are passed down. When there are no written documents, you can tell a story using interviews with individuals. And so it's very important for that. It also focuses in on the story and the experience, the spiritual experience of a person. It's not just facts and data. It's not just about achievements. It's about a person's identity formation, which for Christians is very important. when we look at Scripture, we see how the disciples developed under the tutelage of Jesus, how they became more knowledgeable. We see where they made mistakes. We see where Jesus helped them to grow. And in the same way, when you use biography to tell someone's story, you're not just telling, you're telling a holistic story, the story of their biography, their data, the story of their different achievement, but you're also telling how their identity as a Christian was formed, and how then they went on to minister to the church, and how they might have wrestled with things such as racism or unjust and relations with either missionaries or colonial authorities. And how did they manage to come through that? How did they experience suffering and loss? And how did they overcome? How did they continue on? So you are telling a story that has a theological meaning to it, and which is important for Christians. We are not just interested in facts. We are interested in how a person at the center of that biography lived their Christian witness. It's about telling the story of Christian witness. And so biography is a very useful tool. It is rich in that it digs into different kinds of methodologies, anthropological facts and sociology and history and just traditional culture and looking at things from different angles. And it also tells the stories of the underdog. You can tell anyone's story using biography. And so it is a very rich tool that enables the biographer to even exercise a subversive role, to question the authority, the perhaps what might be considered the official story of someone. There are several stories, and I'm sure there still are many on the DACB, that have been written by non-Africans. They've come to us because we've republished them from books that they give us permission to do that. But every once in a while, I'll get an email from someone in Africa who will say, "Oh, I found the story of this figure, and she was my family member, or I knew her, or this was, and the story that you have is not correct." And they would send me then sources, and they would point me to other sources, and so it would correct the official story of that sometimes was painted this particular African Christian in a very bad light, and it would say no, they were misunderstood, and that was the story told by the colonial authorities or by the missionaries. They didn't understand what was happening, and we also had one project, Luke Scholar, come to write the story of the first Roman Catholic priest in South Africa, the first 4 Roman Catholic priests, and he was on a mission to redeem their story, to correct the history that was in the official documents of the Roman Catholic Church. These first 4 ordained priests in South Africa were extraordinarily successful. They were brilliant young men who had been trained in Europe and then come back, and their gifts for teaching, they understood how to teach the Zulu people among whom they're their people, and because of their success, their missionary supervisors were often jealous of them. And so there was a lot of racism and mistreatment of these young men. And they were also underpaid, which is also a theme often in missionary work in Africa and worldwide. And so then they would have their own farms to sustain themselves by growing their own food. And rules in the church would say, no, they can't do that. But there was no help. There's no help beyond that. So they suffered under the authority of these missionaries. And so as he came to OMSC, to where it was at the time, his name was George Mukuka, the author. His role really was to redeem their stories and to tell the true story of who these young men were. And they are extraordinary figures. The first priest was named Edward Mnganga, and So it was a real, and that's how biography can help to write, to correct the record, and to offer something that is told from the perspective of African Christians about their own forebears. And so, so those are some of the ways biography is really key to the telling of a new narrative of African Christian history on the continent. We'll often joke and say the DACB is a very small project. It is documenting only all the stories from the time of Jesus to the present time across the entire continent and all denominations and all traditions. Anyone who professes to be a Christian, whether I agree or not that they are a Christian, that is not the role of the DACB or the role of any of the editors to decide who enters or not the collection of the DACB online. It is whoever confesses to say, I am a Christian. If they have said that and they, then their story goes into the DACB. It is the readers who then will make their own choices and judgments about it. But we collect the memory, any memory of the Christian faith. There are here and there non-Christians in the collection, because they might have helped the church grow in some way. They might have been instrumental. They might have persecuted the church, which might have also caused the church to grow. So occasionally we have those kinds of figures, and to write anyone can be written about. Any story can be told, from the most important internationally known person, philosopher, scholar, theologian, teacher, to nationalists, politicians, anyone who has had a Christian witness. We're not talking clergymen or clergywomen entirely. We're talking lay people across the spectrum of Christian witness. So anyone's story can be recorded and preserved on the DACB. And the way the content is filtered is, if someone decides they want to write the story of another person because they consider them an important witness to African Christianity, then that's enough. That's enough. Well, the church is a global phenomenon. From the very beginning, as soon as I was just listening this morning to a devotion about how the first time Christians were called Christians was in Antioch, and so that was a church where Greeks had begun to join, and it was not just Jewish. There was a beginning of a spread beyond the Jewish population. And then as the persecution in that, right after Jesus' resurrection and when he's gone and the disciples began to spread the news, the persecution causes the apostles and the disciples to go into all the world. And so they begin to go towards Asia. They began to go towards the north, and they also go towards Africa. So the church from the very beginning becomes global very quickly, because it is spreading to other cultures and other languages. And so that is what the church is. The church is not just one denomination. The church is many. It's like all the sounds, all the musical sounds, all the keys on a piano, or all the colors in the world, which we still don't know what they all are. The church is very diverse, and it is meant to be, we are meant to be together, both as different but as united in the body of Christ. So and African Christianity is extremely diverse. It has so many expressions, from the ancient Coptic Orthodox and Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which go back to the very beginning of Christianity on the continent, and also are marks of the fact that Christianity is a deeply African religion, that no one should ever doubt that Christianity in Africa is deeply African, because it was African before the white missionaries even showed up on the continent. So Christianity is deeply African from the earliest times. And then as it has grown over the centuries, especially in the last few centuries, it has become so diversified. And with the recent Pentecostal movement, it is growing, and churches are mushrooming in all kinds of different expressions. And so you can't talk about the body of Christ without talking about many, many different expressions of Christianity across Africa.